Faffing, defined by the Urban Dictionary as to aimlessly waste time doing useless tasks. Example, stop faffing around and come to bed.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Faffing with Friends. As always, I'm your host, Ivaylo, joined by...
Lawrence.
And...
Joe.
And today, boys, we're going to be talking about one of the greatest ways of escapism in the current situation and lockdown and in the pandemic in general. TV shows, the great medium of TV. So, who would like to go first? Hit me with your favorite TV shows, your favorite characters, anything. You know, and why should we watch these shows during lockdown? Take it away, boys.
I mean, a good thing to start on, I think, is what have we been rewatching, or what have we seen most recently? Personally, I've been rewatching The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, those kinds of long-running series, because they take up the most time, and it's the best time to do a rewatch or a first watch of any of these, because there's just so much wasted time where you can't go outside, you can't do anything, you can't socialize. So these shows being like immense time sinks is just the perfect thing for right now.
Solid choices. Both very solid choices. Joe, yourself?
Well, the thing with me is I've just been rewatching stuff that are really easy to watch, like Archer, Rick and Morty, Frasier, anything with a comedic lean, rather than just something that I would have to pay more attention to than just having in the background. Because I quite like having something in the background if I'm playing a game or just doing some work. It's nice to have that part of my brain working on something like that.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Archer, so that would be a big recommend from me too to anyone who hasn't seen it. Some of the best comedic writing and timing and puns ever, even though it has dragged on and gone on for way longer than maybe it should have as a show. They're still doing good. They're still making interesting choices with their newer seasons, I think.
Oh yeah, I think season 11 finished coming out. I haven't seen it yet. I've only seen up to season 10. So hopefully once that's out on Netflix, I'll watch that too. But it's one of the best. It's one of my favorite animated shows that's also comedy and has a spy theme genre to it. And it's amazing that it's gone on for so long as it has. I think just over a decade now, isn't it?
Yes.
And if you watch it, you'll see there are some funny things that happen with just the branding itself and what it does with the world, which is quite uncommon for shows like that. But I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spoil too much about it.
Yeah, no, you do see a lot of character development in Archer, which you usually don't expect from animated adult shows, in stuff like Rick and Morty even. But I was gonna say South Park way before it. You'd have kind of bottle episodes, at least for the first many seasons, where every episode would be its own adventure, and then things would just reset at the end. And with Archer, it sort of felt like that at the start, but because of the way characters remember their relationships and they develop and they grow to either hate or love one another and have all these histories that come into play later when certain characters get brought back, it does a really good job of doing that in an animated series, which a lot of animated series fail to ever do.
I find it really fascinating how both of you just jumped straight onto rewatching shows in lockdown. I mean, obviously I've done the same thing. I find myself that obviously in lockdown there isn't any new material coming out that's too impressive. I mean, yeah, a few shows have come out recently, but imagine not seeing Breaking Bad and having this lockdown be your first experience with Breaking Bad. That's pretty much going to be absolutely amazing.
I feel attacked.
I mean, good. Sit down and watch Breaking Bad. It's now or never, bro. But, you know what, I find it fascinating because I do tend to also rewatch stuff because, I don't know, there's a sense of familiarity with rewatching TV shows. A lot of people do it because, and I'm going to attack Joe here again, a lot of people do it because they're comfortable and familiar with it, and they don't want to expand into something that might cause them anxiety and just the new territory. Is that right, Joe?
It is partly right, but the other part of it is what I really do enjoy when I want to watch a new show is watching it with someone else. It's just something.
Yes.
I've not really enjoyed watching things on my own, especially new stuff. I mean, I do occasionally when I don't have a choice, and I'm making that sound very horrible. It's not, but I prefer watching stuff with someone else, at least one other person. So usually it's either me and my brother, or we've been watching some anime together sometimes.
Yeah, and obviously with the new additions with Netflix Party, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, yeah. So even on Prime, even on Disney Plus, it's much easier now to just watch in tandem with someone else, so long as they have a subscription.
I mean, I can understand that, and I mean, one of the latest things I have seen is a show called The Sinner on Netflix, and I only watched season 3, and I only watched it because someone very near and dear to my heart recommended it because they'd seen it, and they thought it was kind of hilariously bad at points, and they wanted to have someone to laugh at it with and talk shit about, because that's part of the fun of television, I feel, discussing it with people and talking about it, and if it's bad, joking and making memes out of it, and if it's good, doing the opposite, appreciating the good parts, discussing characters and stuff, or even then jokes that carry over into like your interactions thereon. Like, I know a lot of people, again, a person that was very near and dear to my heart, same person that recommended I see The Sinner, I watched the IT Crowd with them at one point, and the jokes from the IT Crowd have pretty much never left our interactions. Will still make jokes from that show to this day, because it's such a point of connection, seeing certain things together. They become part of the in joke and the in culture between people. So yeah, I can understand the need to like see certain things with other people, even though lately that has absolutely not been a big option for anyone.
So is Sinner a good show?
I've started season 1 and 2 now after seeing 3, and I think it's good if you only watch season 1 and 2.
Okay, fair enough. Good to know. Just so skip that recommendation, people. But, again, on the topic of animation, I have been rewatching a lot of cartoons for some reason. I just find myself really enamored by it. Again, it really brings me a sense of comfort. I'm not here to like it, but I love watching my old cartoons. The best one that I've always watched as a kid and that I'm always going to watch now and just probably going to rewatch later on in life has to be Ed, Edd n Eddy, man. I absolutely love Ed, Edd n Eddy. It's a phenomenal TV show for what it was. It was part of that great era of Cartoon Network renaissance that was just like them at their best. Just the writing of it, the inside jokes, the breaking the fourth wall moments, the absolute crazy soundtrack where it was just like animal noises. It's just, It's absolutely, Ed, Edd n Eddy is phenomenal. It's a great lockdown to just sit down and watch by yourself or with your friends, and it's
I think it is one of the like masterpieces to come out of that Cartoon Network era. I think it and Courage the Cowardly Dog are the two that I keep like always go back to just for memes and just because they're good and they were well made. So yeah, I get that. Like I've rewatched Courage, but I rewatched it before the pandemic, so now I don't really. I remember it well enough that I don't feel like I need to go back to it.
But like as soon as the pandemic hit, I literally just like pulled up a USB stick of like all the old cartoons, and I just like went through them with obviously Ed, Edd n Eddy being at the top. But I am gonna watch Archer, and I am gonna go into Futurama as well later on. So yeah, I mean, animated shows for lockdown, I feel they're absolutely phenomenal. I feel like they're absolutely fantastic. If anyone has any, I have one to add of my own, but if anyone has any more animated stuff they want to add, then please go ahead.
I mean, I there's no one these days who hasn't seen stuff like Rick and Morty, so there's no point even telling people.
I haven't seen Rick and Morty. Good. Fight me.
Okay, you're one of those insane people. But, it had a big dip when it became too popular and people were being, the way fandoms usually are, unbearable about it. But it's still decent. It still has good jokes and writing. It's ridiculously meta sometimes. It's a good animated show if you're bored. It's not as smart as some people make it out to be, so it's not like it's hard to understand or anything. Yeah.
And another one that's an absolute favorite of mine is the one I was going to discuss is Bojack Horseman. I literally feel that Bojack Horseman is some of the best television Netflix have produced, period. Not just for an animated show, but just like...
I think it's some of the best television produced, period, outside of Netflix in general.
Exactly. It's a really top-notch show. It's, despite its ridiculous concept on paper, and when you suddenly realize that, like, oh yeah, you have these weird anthropomorphic characters, and they're coexisting with humans, and they even have relationships with humans. But once you get to, like, the nitty-gritty of the show, once you get into the depths of that show, it is such a realistic take on some incredibly dark themes, and it's
some heavy emotional stuff.
Very good. It's incredibly beautiful to see.
And I'd say the weird thing is I finished that show after lockdown began.
Yeah,
and
how did you feel about it?
It affected me like emotionally really hard, which was actually kind of not good for me during that period because I was very alone and isolated after seeing one of the most emotionally heavy like shows and finales and final seasons of anything I've ever watched, and it was pretty rough as a result. But I still think it's like a masterpiece, and even
it's
then,
definitely
it's
top 10,
definitely
top 10 show, not just because of the animation quality, but as a television medium, insane show, solid.
And I mean that brings me to stuff like Arrested Development that I'd recommend, because the person who voices Bojack Horseman is a character on that show, yes. And that's a very good show, except for the final season, but that's still 4 incredible seasons of just some of those memorable, hilarious, ongoing running gags that I've seen in the show.
Final seasons being trash. Is that what we're
going
to? Oh yeah,
we're gonna go there soon.
We're gonna go there. We're gonna go there. You know, I'm gonna hand it over to my man Joe, who I believe has been building this up for a few years. So my man can just go on a wild one. Go on, brother. Go on.
I could probably write books the same length as the Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire books about how bad and terrible and unnecessary season 8 was. I'll save most of you the trouble here. I'll probably do like a single episode on that at some point myself and then put it up somewhere. But okay. So right now I've basically just before the new year I started rewatching Game of Thrones. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but precisely because I want to talk about it. So I started watching the first season. It was okay. It made me feel the same emotions it did back when I first saw it, except for the fact that I did something different this time round in my viewing of Game of Thrones than I've never done before, which is I skipped every single Daenerys scene that there is because I knew what was going to come. And basically, it was all pointless to watch anyway, because all the character development she has, all the arcs that she completes, all the things that she does, the laws.
Even most of the characters, like in that side of the world in the show, get dropped the moment she leaves and goes to Westeros.
Like just this morning, not this morning, yesterday, I finished watching the end of season 6. And she leaves Daria Naharis in Meereen to basically rule over Giscard.
And you never see him again.
Never see him again. You'd kind of think he'd be a very important character to not only help out with, the Long Night, but also the aftermath when she goes down to King's Landing and has to treat with Cersei. Because the whole thing they're trying to talk about in the 4th and 5th episode of season 8, which I haven't gotten to, I've only just finished watching episode 3 of season 8, is that Dany's now lonely and isolated. She's worried that Jon is a threat to her rule, even though he's been dumbed down to not want to, take his birthright.
I don't want it.
She's my queen.
Exactly. It's the craziest thing. Because you know why? Because Jon's whole arc is to break every single oath he took when he joined the Night's Watch. He says he will never know a woman. He meets Ygritte and he loses his virginity. He says he'll never, become a ruler or whatever. He becomes king of Winterfell. All these stuff he swears never to do, he does. So that's his arc. Like, the only one time he doesn't go against his actual arc is when Stannis asks him if he wants to be legitimized and become Lord Paramount of the North. And he says no, because he's just been elected to the Night's Watch. Nobody in their right mind would abandon that post to go and, be selfish, especially not someone like Jon, who's been brought up by someone like Ned Stark, right? The most honorable and selfless person there is.
I want to say this brings up, I tried to rewatch it, right? I saw 2 episodes of season 1, and the feeling and knowledge of how little of everything established in this show goes anywhere because of that final season made me drop it and just not bother. I have no interest in rewatching it.
The big... So, 2 things, and then I'll shut up about this until I do a whole thing on it later on. But I was watching, after the episodes, they had these behind-the-scenes thing with Dan and David where they would break down the episode. And it was in episode, I think, 2 that I watched. At the end, they were talking about how Dany starts to lose faith in Tyrion because he starts to do some dumb stuff. And I thought, boy... Look who's speaking, And the other thing is, the biggest impact the show kind of had on my life, other than how terrible it went down. Obviously, the source material isn't finished. George R. Martin is still one of my favorite writers. Is that I was writing my dissertation at the time, just as I mentioned in the last episode. And I was writing about the three mothers, the main female characters, Catelyn Stark or Tully, Cersei Lannister, and Daenerys Targaryen. But I decided to remove Daenerys because of how things started to go in the show. I made the mistake of watching the show whilst I was writing my dissertation.
Oh no!
So
oh no!
It impacted me. It sort of basically, in my mind, it's just made all my arguments subpar, and I had to like redraft a lot of stuff. It went into a different direction, but I lost faith in the show, and not just the show, but for a time in the world that even George had created, because I thought, okay, so basically George sat down at some point and said, this is what I want the show to go. But the problem was in the execution of the showrunners. The showrunners obviously got very tired of having to do this for almost a decade, which is crazy to me because...
Yeah, I wish I could be rich, well-paid, doing
exactly,
a job,
that's
like
the
that, and get
best
tired.
job in the world. Exactly. Give it to me and you. Like, all three of us could probably run that show for the next 20 years and we wouldn't get tired one bit.
It's super ironic because HBO did offer them to like 13 seasons, up to 13 seasons.
Exactly. Even George himself said that. He said this should have gone on for a lot longer. It was just that the showrunners got... So the funny thing is, the showrunners got tired. They moved on, right? And everything they touched since...
they've been dropped.
They've been dropped. They got dropped from Star Wars. They got dropped from Netflix. They did a Lovecraft movie, which I kind of don't want to see because I'm afraid they're going to ruin that for me as well.
God damn.
And that's it. That's basically all they've done. And it's so depressing. I mean, obviously I feel sorry for them, but I kind of don't because they brought this on themselves. Like Brian Cogman, it was one of the best guys in the show because he wrote the last episode of the season 8 that wasn't Dan and Dave, the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which is just before the war starts, and that's one of the best episodes.
The only episode I actually liked out of that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and then he got hired to do he got hired to do the other show, Blood Moon, but that got cancelled. And then I think he did some work on House of Dragon, and then he I think he's gone off to do Lord of the Rings on Prime now. I'm not sure.
Amazon got it.
Exactly, yeah, because that's how good he is. Like, they should have at least, said, all right, Dan and Dave, we're tired of doing this. We'll hand over the reins to Brian Cogman, who's an absolute genius when it comes to what he's done for the show. And he'll be fine. They'll do at least another, 3 or 4 seasons. And then
I'm going to have to step in and stop you because we know this will go on far longer.
Exactly, yeah. Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody.
For a while,
this has helped because the thing I want to talk about next is we just covered a show that had a finale that was such hot trash that some of us can't even begin to rewatch the show.
Yeah.
Even if we only watch the good seasons because it builds up to nothing. Now, I want to talk with Ivaylo about a show that had the perfect ending, the perfect show the whole way through, pretty much.
Okay,
and that is Breaking Bad.
Here we go. Hit me with your Breaking Bad conversation.
Okay, so I rewatched Breaking Bad since the lockdown because I wanted to watch Better Call Saul with my whole memory of the series refreshed going into it. And it doesn't just hold up. It is probably the best piece of television ever. And I'm saying that after earlier having mentioned, that I'm also rewatching The Sopranos.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm putting it up there against all the supposed greats right now and just saying, having rewatched it, it doesn't just hold up, it is still just as good. Every single, wow moment still hits the landing every single time.
It's absolutely insane what Breaking Bad has achieved in terms of, a medium. It's surpassed TV in my opinion, and it's pretty much become a literary case study at this point. Breaking Bad is insane in its characterization, its setting, its themes. Every good thing that you've heard about Breaking Bad is 100% true. And I'm so glad you mentioned the ending because, again, the ending is incredibly key to, the whole narrative. The fact that it ends...
spoiler warning if we accidentally give anything away. Yes. It's old, go watch it.
Yeah, it's very old. I'm sorry, I'm trying my best to, not say the ending, but,
It's perfect.
It's a perfect ending to a very tragic, but at the same time, very fulfilling story. And this might be like a hot take, but I don't particularly like the Breaking Bad movie at all. I don't really like the whole El Camino part. I think that it's
I liked it as a Jesse standalone thing, but I think it could have easily been just a smaller section of the last few episodes showing us what happens to Jesse.
Absolutely. But, Breaking Bad is insane, and it still has some gut-punching moments, like Lily of the Valley is still, like, one of my favorite stuff.
And not just like the show itself, the narrative, the moments. Every single casting choice for that show.
Giancarlo Esposito as Gus, and we're going to talk more about him in another show later on.
And I mean, not just like Gus, Walt is perfectly cast, Jesse is perfectly cast.
Bryan Cranston is a living legend, man. He went from the dad in Malcolm to like one of the most iconic criminal masterminds of all time, and Heisenberg.
Yeah, one of the most like depthful characters ever. Like the way you see his arc go from, literally Breaking Bad, as the show is titled. It to this day, it still amazes me.
It's very funny you mentioned the title because there is the Bulgarian translation of Breaking Bad is In the Shoes of Satan. And that is absolutely crazy in my opinion, because it has nothing to do with Breaking Bad, but the man literally just puts on the shoes of Satan and becomes a fucking devil. Like, yeah, it works. He is the fucking danger, like...
I am the one who knocks.
He is the one who knocks. If you haven't watched Breaking Bad, it's a great show, not just for lockdown, but for any part of your life. Joe... Go and watch it, please. By all means.
I mean, I definitely will now that I've heard that review, of course.
We've plugged it enough. We can't say enough about Breaking Bad because everything has already been said. But
now something a little less serious and dramatic that both me and Ivaylo for sure have seen now is something that's been coming out really as all this has been unfolding, and that is The Boys.
The absolute boys.
I think we've both really liked The Boys as both a respite from all the superhero stuff that we have been consuming for like a decade now, because it is such a like rebuke of everything superhero related, and it's such a good parody and perfect making fun of that culture at this point, that it was such a breath of fresh air.
I sat down to watch The Boys with my parents because they were looking for stuff to watch, and they also surprisingly really, really liked The Boys because, again, I've seen all the Marvel films with my parents. My dad's like a hardcore Batman fan. He's seen all the 1989 Batmans all the way through George Clooney's absolutely atrocious performance, but The Boys is fantastic with its subversion of expectations, and it is absolutely fantastic in taking the traditional idea of a hero and applying it to an incredibly realistic world. Because I'm pretty sure you, me, and everyone else who's seen The Boys can guarantee that, superheroes are gonna be more like they are in The Boys than they are in the MCU. That's a fact, right? You believe that, right?
Absolutely. I think it's literally the exact thing I'd expect.
And all the themes it covers as well. It's very interesting how it just seems to reflect the current political climate, not just of America, but of the entire world. Like, the scene where Homelander is presented as I feel
like that's on just how good... I feel that's on how good the writers are.
Absolutely.
Like, clearly they've been taking cues from literally everything happening in the world.
If I'm allowed to do some close analysis, one of my favorite parts of season 2 was, spoilers again if you haven't seen it, was one of the relationship between Homelander and Stormfront. It was probably my favorite allegory because here you have the symbol and personification of America, which is Homelander. And he is, unstoppable. He's war. He's all about fighting, freedom, all your typical American values, which have been
patriotism,
and which have been so incredibly twisted, almost to the point of self-parody. And then, on the other hand, you have Stormfront, who, again, spoilers, is the first ever soup. And she was created by the Nazis. She was created by her Nazi husband, and she is a living embodiment of Nazism. And those two characters form a tumultuous and destructive relationship, which, in my opinion, is somewhat reflective of the American political state.
And everyone keep in mind, we are recording this a few days after the Capitol was stormed by a bunch of patriots.
A bunch of patriots who, at the same time... again, we mentioned in the last episode how Judge Holden is a personification of all the evil within humanity. Just the way Stormfront is a personification of Nazism. And she's just slowly but surely behind the scenes creeping back into the mainstay. And Homelander is just the enabler of that. So yeah, Boys is a fantastic show. I love it to bits. Another strong.
Also, I feel it came at the perfect time because
Yes.
a lot of us, I feel myself especially, is so sick of superhero crap.
Yes.
I'm not even excited for like the next phase of the MCU because I've seen what I wanted to see and I kind of want a break. But this was such a, it's such a breath of fresh air to see like heroes depicted as pieces of crap and as really terrible people, and seeing all this interesting play on how they are marketed and how they're more like a luxurious commodity, like they use every single facet of their personality to like sell a product, and that's such an interesting thing because not only is it commenting on the whole super merchandised superhero culture, it's also exactly how it would be if heroes were a thing here.
And I love the section where they have where it's just like when Ashley is just trying to appease to like the new generation, where she mentions recruiting Blind Spot. Oh, we're gonna have a disabled member of the soup, and then we're gonna get an ethnic woman for the 7. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like it's absolutely. But yeah, I'm sorry, Joe. I know you haven't seen The Boys, but it's a fantastic show. Go and watch it.
Oh, it's definitely on the list. I'll get to it. Don't worry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we should let Joe talk about the show he's seen.
I'm sorry, Joe. Go
for
for
a bit.
And that's okay. So wow, man. Okay, so I'll talk about this for a bit. So Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a very, very easy show to watch.
Okay.
It's obviously a comedy. It's about a police department. And you start off with Andy Samberg, and he's hilarious in almost anything that he does. Although my favorite character happens to be Gina. So it's just these characters trying to grapple with being part of the police force, but also their social life. And it's just hilarity. Hilarity ensues. Everyone from Terry Crews to, I don't know, whatever guest appearance they have that day. Judge Judy is a fan favorite, I'm sure. Yeah, it's just a great show. It's just so easy to watch and just have a great laugh with.
I mean, I think every character is like so uniquely hilarious in their own right. Like, I find Holt to be the funniest thing ever. Just the way he's written. This stoic person who cannot show emotion. And, he'll be happy and he'll say, I am happy. What do you mean?
Yeah, you
that
can't
always
tell.
Gets to me. Exactly.
That's right. He'll have a still face. You can't tell if he's upset or just ecstatic. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine goes hand in hand with another show I think we both really love that I've been rewatching now because of the amount of time I have just while doing other stuff especially. I've seen it over like 3 times now though. Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Absolutely.
It is my favorite comedy show of all time. Like, no questions asked.
Yeah.
It's birthed so much of like the dark humor that I have, and it's absolutely the reason I am and find the things that I do funny at this point in my life. Like, just following these horrible characters, right? These horrible people who constantly get themselves into stupid situations, and you have to see them work their way out of it being horrible people. They never improve as human beings. They never learn any lesson, right? You're just seeing these terrible people double down on being terrible. And it's so hilarious and absurd, the kind of crap that happens as a result. And I think even the casting is perfect. Charlie's played by the perfect actor. Dennis is, because they're also writers on the show. They've shaped this show from the very beginning. That's why I think that it works so well. It's such a good comedy because no one understands the character better than the people writing them who are also playing them in this show.
Absolutely. It started on a very low budget. The 3 of them, just used the camcorder to record the day inside or around Philadelphia. And then, the guy who plays Mac, Rob McElhenney, he was able to get creative freedom when he went to Fox and they offered him the deal. So the first season I've only seen probably twice, even though it's quite good. My favorite part of the show is when Danny DeVito joins the team because he
Frank
really steals the show. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Danny DeVito found his like perfect role when they made him Frank. Like I can't even think of Danny DeVito as Danny DeVito anymore. Even though I know him and I've seen him in lots of films, growing up as well, especially the ones he did, with Arnold and during that era. But every time I see Danny DeVito now, I think Frank Reynolds, the guy with the eggs.
Yes. And I love how they occasionally parody his films. Like there was one episode where they parody One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's just one of my favorite episodes when...
Yes, we're Frog Boy.
Yeah, I'm Frog Boy, exactly, yeah. Oh, it's just so good. Well, one of my friends recommended Always Sunny to me, and I didn't expect to like it so much, but growing up on dark comedy by the Coen brothers, like that's the movies, I watched the Coen brothers movies like The Big Lebowski and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? So that's my introduction to dark comedy or dark humor. So when I kind of grew out of those movies, I didn't really expect to find anything on a similar level until I started watching It's Always Sunny. And my goodness, like almost every year or two, I start watching the season from beginning to end or to whatever point it's gotten up to at that point. Or just occasionally I'll watch the specials or I'll just drop in midway. And it is hilarious. Absolutely. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who just wants to watch something comforting in a weird way and just easy to watch.
And on my list it goes then, because I haven't actually seen any of it. So I should almost certainly invest some time into it, because I'm not really a fan of comedies. Like, I'm never really a fan of
Are there any like comedy shows you've watched that you did enjoy about it?
I watched one of it's not really a comedy show, but it's still quite funny. It's called On My Block. It's on Netflix. It's a pretty nice little coming of age show about like a bunch of teenagers and they're all friends, and it's quite nostalgic in a way, because it's all about playing outside and facing all the challenges that you do growing up. They live in a quite dangerous area as well, so there's obviously like loads of crime, loads of gang signs, loads of like criminal interactions, which it's just presented as being part of growing up, and it's just it has some really impactful moments, but the jokes sometimes land, sometimes they don't. There's a running gag where one character, Jamal, he starts developing like feelings for a little gnome, like a garden gnome, and they go together on like a hunt. And it's really weird, because he's talking to himself, and the gnome's obviously there like just not doing anything, but like he finds comfort in this gnome person, because no one else wants to be involved in whatever he's involved in. There's also moments of like significant romantic tensions, which is quite nice as well. It's not really a comedy, but it's a jack of all trades kind of show. Quite a low nice show. Only 3 seasons. I hope it does not befall the Netflix curse, which is running rampant right now. And
I know what you mean. Before we move on to more serious, just 1 second. I think we're going to loop back around to more serious television shows. I do have a few more recommendations if someone wants something happier and more comedic during this time, especially.
Boo. I'm joking, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I obviously, anyone who hasn't seen Parks and Rec and The Office, either the American or UK one, I'd say both if you have the time. These are all shows that are just... They're funny, and they all have, at some point at the very least, maybe the UK Office not as often, they all have messages that, they're good. They make you feel good. They make you feel a sense of positivity. They bring you to a point where you maybe don't feel as bad as current circumstances are forcing a lot of people to have to deal with lately. And the last recommendations in terms of comedy would be The Thick of It. Now, The Thick of It is not as much of a happy, uplifting show, but it is a political satire that is, in my opinion, one of the most well-written shows ever in terms of joke writing. The dialogue is almost Shakespearean at points, and since we're all students who've studied English, I think we all understand what I mean when I say that.
Absolutely.
It feels like it is written by a master of writing. Every single joke and interaction between characters in The Thick of It is just insane. And I think one thing that helps watching it is it kind of feels like the actual parody of our current government at times here in the UK right now.
Okay, oh Lord, here we go.
It feels like you are literally watching a bumbling, headless chicken of a government and its inner workings.
Oh,
and you sort of feel like... It's very timely.
Lawrence, talk dirty to me, man.
The funny thing about that is, I mean, obviously, Armando Iannucci is such a good writer. What he's created with this show, it doesn't matter who's in power at the time, because he made this back in 2005, right? And it ran all the way up to 2012.
Yep.
But it's almost relevant to any government that's currently in power because it's so well made. I haven't watched it as much as you have, so you're much more of an authority on it than I am. But of what I've seen, it's just perfect. It's just perfect.
And it has one of the greatest tragicomedy characters I think I've ever seen, and that's Malcolm Tucker, played by Peter Capaldi.
Yeah.
He is... I've never heard insults of the sort this character uses in this show. He is such a horrible, mean-spirited piece of shit. I think a review from really long ago described him as the Iago of the modern age if Iago had a phone.
Oh, Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I think it absolutely worth watching just to see Peter Capaldi make up these hilarious swears and like tangents and rants he goes on.
Yeah, and if I could also mention a few more positive comedic shows of my own, two shows that definitely got me through. So obviously you mentioned Parks and Rec. That got me through really tough times, especially second year uni. It was very tough on me, like just things at home, things that, outside of home. So that really got me through it. But also Frasier got me through even tougher stuff. Like Frasier is from a long time ago. And by a long time ago, I mean from like, I think 93 to 2004. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's still my favorite comedy show of all time. I
still remember watching it on the Comedy Channel back when the Comedy Channel was a thing.
I got used to watching it because, if I got him up in the morning and I had to go to work or I had to go to uni, it would be on Channel 4. So I would watch it on there. And then eventually I got the box set. And just whenever I want to dip into it, it doesn't matter where I start watching it. It's just amazing. And both me and my brother have decided that we're somehow poor copies of Frasier and Niles. and we just really relate because I got him into the show as well. And he really loves it. And it's just something that we also bond over. And it really got me like, I started watching Frasier at a time when my family was going through like one of the toughest moments, in our life. My dad was really sick, and just at home, and it was tough seeing him every day withering rather than, doing well and all that stuff. So that got me through it until he got much better. So I would definitely recommend Frasier, and like you said, Parks and Rec. I'm sure we're going to eventually move on to shows like The Mandalorian, so I'll save that for later. But yeah, definitely go watch Frasier if you can find it. Parks and Rec is on Prime. It's just brilliant shows, so go for it, dude.
Now, Ivaylo, you were mentioning the curse of Netflix. The curse of Netflix cancellations.
Indeed.
Please
touch on that. I shall talk about that a bit more, but just from your conversations, your beautiful conversations have just shown me that I'm a really miserable git who should really watch some more comedy. But, thank you all for your wonderful recommendations. And again, for anyone listening out there, you're more than welcome to check these out. We're in the same boat here, for anyone who hasn't seen any of those comedy shows. Now, I'm going to talk about the curse of Netflix because this one hurts, man. This one really hurts. And I love professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is one of my childhood passions. I still occasionally tune in to watch it. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. I love every single bit of it. When I discovered Glow on Netflix, I was incredibly skeptical about it, but upon watching all the seasons out at the minute, I fell in love with it. Glow tells the story of the gorgeous ladies of wrestling, Glow, a federation of all female wrestlers who are really just there to be put as eye candy. They're put there to be your typical kind of male fetish kind of performer. Just go out there and don't actually wrestle or do anything. Just show off your body and be appeasing to the eye. And the story actually shows them progressing into just genuinely strong and powerful competitors, capable of putting on amazing wrestling performances, which actually coincides with a theme going on in wrestling called the Women's Revolution, where a similar trajectory happens, where the women are given more creative freedom to express themselves through their wrestling, as opposed to just being there for the visual appearances. And Glow was absolutely beautiful in doing that. It was gorgeous. It had real life drama. It's also very well depicted the stuff about the 80s wrestling. You have wrestlers who fell down the addiction of cocaine. One of my favorite scenes where a wrestler does cocaine and then ends up breaking the leg of someone during the match on purpose. But Glow, it was an amazing embodiment of that era. I absolutely love it. And it got cancelled in the pandemic after filming exactly one episode, and they had to hold production, and Netflix was like, you know what? No! We're gonna just straight up cancel you. So this is a big fuck you to Netflix for cancelling Glow, and I hope to see it revived one day.
See, I share your I share your sentiment about a big fuck you to Netflix for cancellations, because one of the shows on Netflix that I'd become most invested in early in Netflix's life cycle was Marco Polo. Now Marco Polo was at the point touted as the Netflix competition for Game of Thrones based on how much money it cost to make. It wasn't anything like that though. It was a setting that you do not see touched upon often in media. It was, Mongol Empire.
Similar to Go,
Yeah, the Mongol Empire and Marco Polo and his interactions with Kublai Khan at, that point in history. And it was such an interesting and like enrapturing niche thing that I loved and I watched, and they ended it on a cliffhanger and it then got cancelled by Netflix.
The worst.
And to this day, I despise Netflix for this. I will never watch a Netflix original until it is finished because I do not want to get Marco Polo'd again.
That is absolutely horrible. So we have Joe who's just pissed off at the Game of Thrones finale, but at least you got a finale, Joe. At least you got a finale.
I'm equally pissed off about Marco Polo because I love the first season. But it's just the second season was so strange to me. I mean, up until the point where Kublai does, I'm not going to spoil it, but does what he has to do with the Chinese
it's a dead
emperor.
Show. Who cares if we spoil it? It's dead. It's never coming back.
Right. So I start watching the show exactly where just before he has to decide whether he's going to spare the baby, well, not the baby, but the child emperor of China who was just conquered, or whether he's going to execute him. And I did not watch this show, I think, for at least 4 years. And it was because of Lawrence telling me how badly it ended that I decided, okay, I just need to see this for myself.
It's so sad that it ended that way. They
So,
got Kublai Khan cast as the
horrible,
perfect man.
Oh, yeah,
Kublai is he's one of those villains where he's not really a villain, and the entire fucking show you are just empathizing with him. You understand where he's coming from. You see what, the Mongols, who are usually depicted as savages with absolutely no point or anything to do, right? But like they invented so much during their time. They're responsible for so much. I think it was Kublai in history who invented paper money. He's the reason we use banknotes. And you see this guy who's usually historically portrayed as a villain and nothing else. And it was just so fascinating to have that as a character. I love morally grey characters like that in television.
Yeah.
And to see it end on a completely unfulfilling end like that, I went and read the history of what happens to him and his empire after because I was so annoyed.
You went to check out the source material?
Yes, legitimately. I went and just read the history.
And again, I mean, Netflix is not all bad, but we do, if we're talking about the cancellation curse, which, I mean, this one probably was not up to them. But
the problem is with Netflix, a lot of the time they incentivize for views, and then once they get more eyes, they don't care what happens with those shows.
Yeah. And,
they've gotten more subscribers, so who cares if this show gets like 4 or 5 seasons?
House of Cards. House of
Cards.
No,
we don't talk about House of Cards.
Let's not talk about that failure.
That
show ended at the end of season 2. That's
absolutely.
And again, the Marvel shows on Netflix, they are a big old favorite of mine. I genuinely think that Daredevil is one of the pinnacles of the MCU, along with Jessica Jones and David Tennant as what's his name? Kilgrave. Yes. Kilgrave is one of the top villains, not just in like.
And I mean, Johnny Bernthal as the Punisher has become quite iconic too.
Yes, they recreated in Daredevil. They recreated a scene from the comics.
Yes,
literally frame by frame, where the Punisher and Daredevil clash their ideologies because Daredevil's about,
that's one of the best scenes in the show.
Yeah, criminals can be reformed, and Punisher's like, well, I'm just gonna fucking kill them all. And the scene is Punisher ties up Daredevil to a roof,
and they just talk
to a chimney with chains,
and
they just talk it out, and it's a clash of ideologies, and it's just
so fascinating.
It's so beautiful. It's
so sad because now these shows are like a very small niche because the Disney Plus ones will never be quite the same.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe they do.
Did.
That's why we don't really have to blame Netflix because literally when Daredevil season 3 came out, that's when Disney just like pulled out of Netflix, and that's when Disney Plus was about to kick off. So again, I'm not blaming everything on Netflix, but be careful if you guys invest in shows during lockdown that don't have a resolution.
I mean, be careful if you invest in any ongoing show because you never know if it'll get cancelled. It's one of my biggest problems with watching ongoing media. It is heartbreaking when you watch something, become deeply invested, and then it gets cancelled for whatever stupid reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if I could make 2 recommendations for anyone who's interested in historical periods, right? So for me, I watched, I think, Wolf Hall back in 2015, and I wasn't expecting, because I used to watch the Tudors way back when they were actually
I think we've all seen the Tudors, yes?
Yeah, we've all seen Tudors.
Yes, we all like the Tudors. It's
for sure. It's a very good show. I'm sure we're going to get around to it immediately after this, but I wasn't expecting anyone to actually consider following the story from someone not the royals' point of view. So Wolf Hall follows the point of view of Thomas Cromwell.
Oh.
Now, if you're looking for a truly Machiavellian character, not a subpar, watered-down Littlefinger, right? Then Wolf Hall is what you want to watch, because I know the book's really well received. I've got a copy. I've read some of it. It's just not my cup of tea, the way it's written, the tense that it's written in. But the show, my goodness, Mark Rylance he steals the show. He does such an amazing performance. All the cast do, but it's so well written. At least the first 3 episodes are a bit slow to get going. But once you're in it, oh my goodness, like, it's so well done. It's so well executed. This was, I think I was watching this either just before Brexit happened or just after Brexit happened. And for me, it just really sealed, it was a year before the Brexit referendum. In retrospect, it really sealed how conflict works. Like, for example, you have a glimpse of what the Reformation was like and how Henry goes immediately from Catherine of Aragon all the way straight to Anne Boleyn. And then it ends with Henry meeting Jane Seymour at Wolf Hall. That's what it's named after. And unfortunately, they ended the show there and they haven't made a sequel. And I'm just so devastated that it's been 5 years now.
Yeah.
And that's probably the BBC's rival to Game of Thrones, even though they used to air Game of Thrones. But, I'm sorry, they used to air Rome. I got my HBO shows mixed up. And I don't know why they ended it, because it could have done so well. But and also The Lost Kingdom is on Netflix. It's pretty good. It's not always accurate the way they depict the historical period of the Anglo-Saxons and King Alfred and his son Edward and so on. But it's also a very great show. It talks about, how the Vikings came and tried to invade and take over and stuff, stuff that you might be interested in if you're currently playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Definitely go watch The Lost Kingdom. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
This brings us to something I like a lot, and I think we all like. We're all big history marks, aren't we?
I have a degree in history.
So, yeah, exactly. So I think this brings us to, there are a lot of good historical drama shows.
Absolutely.
Like, we all talked about, mentioned how we all like the Tudors, because it shows a period of Henry VIII that usually gets skipped over what you get taught in schools here in the UK. It gives you more like insight into him as this, in his normal royal life, not just when he was like invading France and getting his leg messed up or killing his wives.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fascinating. I think another really fun, at least halfway of it, or a bit more than half, Vikings, I think, is a very good historical drama. Only because Travis Fimmel does such a good job playing Ragnar Lothbrok. The legendary figure that we don't even know if he was really real historically. It's such an interesting performance. He has such weird mannerisms, and he's nailed them down to such a level where once you see Ragnar, when you see other people mimicking this sort of behavior and gimmickry and the way he moves, you will always think back to this character.
That's absolutely.
And I think that's very interesting.
I'm very glad you brought up the Tudors, because the Tudors are one of the first shows that I literally just sat down and enjoyed throughout, because as you mentioned, I was a big history mark. And I still am. Like, I love my history, and I love the fact that the Tudors does such a good job in just showing the inside working thoughts of Henry VIII, and really presenting him as a very flawed human being, which he ultimately was. But at the same time, he is just incredibly driven by anything else that we as humans are driven by. Attention, love, lust as well. But to see that historical period come to life, I am an early modernist as well, so for me the early modern period is like where I shine and where my knowledge shines. And although there are tons of historical inaccuracies, just like with every single adaptation.
Oh yeah, every single show, yeah.
It's the closest we have to like a perfect dramatization of the life of one of England's most fantastic monarchs. Fun fact, that's also the first time we saw Natalie Dormer in a breakout role as Anne Boleyn, which absolutely stole the show, and Henry Cavill as his best friend, the Duke of Suffolk.
Yes, my God, I know so many people who forget Henry Cavill was in that. It's like you tell them and they're like, whoa.
Yeah, he was one of his breakout roles. My mum was a big fan of him there. I mean, she still is a big Henry Cavill fan, but
Ivaylo, you and me talking about history, there's a bit of a historical show we both love deeply, I think, that touches on something very near and dear to us being from Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Do you know what show I am talking about?
Are you referring to the HBO masterclass that they put out exactly after Game of Thrones Season 8 to save some face? Chernobyl.
Yes, I am.
Chernobyl is a masterpiece. It is only
My
only a
God.
5-episode miniseries, but I absolutely love Chernobyl because it really, again, it shows a period of time which doesn't really often get dramatized, and when it's dramatized, it's usually dramatized very poorly. And
it's usually dramatized from the point of view of the West. And not the inner workings of the USSR.
And you have this really nice comparison of one man going against a authoritarian, totalitarian, oppressive system of governments in the face of Jared Harris, who plays Valery Legasov to absolute perfection. He is absolutely... And these are all real people, by the way, except for the scientist lady who was like a personification of all the scientists who helped combat the disaster. But Chernobyl is absolutely insane. It really puts you in a place of dread, in a place of absolute...
It does something that I've seen very few shows do, and that is the sound design is terrifyingly
It's the same person who did the Joker soundtrack, so...
Yes, there is a specific scene where you are in a very dark place, and you are just listening to a Geiger counter go off.
That's all it is.
As they're moving through the rubble of this, nuclear reactor meltdown. And the Geiger counter going harder and harder, faster and faster is absolutely chilling.
As the light dims out.
That entire show.
Yes.
That entire show is just terrifying. And we know people, I think, who lived through that era. You and me.
Both of my
family
parents,
members.
Family members
Exactly.
who lived through that. They were both terrified. And again, it was just so downplayed by the Russian government. Even to this day.
Exactly.
One of the things that brought actual tears to my eyes was the finale of Season 5, Vechnaya Pamять, which was pretty much the Russians still to this day only acknowledge 16 victims of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, when we all know that the damages are far more than that. We're talking about increased rates of cancer, increased rates of illness. It is an absolutely destructive show, and it's so powerful. And
I mean, even the actors they got, every single one is perfect. They're all incredible actors. Jared Harris has been one of my favorites since forever.
I do believe you're about to jump on the Jared Harris wagon. Which
it's time for the Jared Harris wagon, ladies and gentlemen.
Take it off.
So Jared Harris has been in way more media than you'd think that I love. So obviously he's in Chernobyl, and he's one of the two best performances, I'd say, Ivaylo.
Absolutely, I think he's the best performance. Absolutely, him and Sabrina, which is, I believe.
Yes.
I forgot his name. I really forgot his name.
We all, people go watch
Skarsgård, Peter Skarsgård.
Skarsgård, him, yes. The big Skarsgård family of It and many other ones. Okay, so Jared Harris has been in so much ridiculously good crap. One of the shows I watched earlier last year in its entirety, I could never watch it when I was younger, and I think it was legitimately I was too easily distracted to sit through it, because it is a period drama of real period drama we're talking. It doesn't do stuff to stay over exciting. It is just a character study of a specific few characters during a specific point in time and in an industry, the ad industry in the US, and that is Mad Men. Now, Jared Harris is in that as well, and he does an incredible job, and he has an incredible role for a few seasons in that show. That is a show that I recommend to anyone who can stomach slower shows, who doesn't need consistent drip-fed action or, excitement, because that show is utterly incredible, if you ask me. And then there's another one that way too few people know of for some reason. So AMC at some point released a show called The Terror.
I've heard about this.
Now, every season is a different story, but the first season specifically, based on its namesake, follows the disappearance of the HMS Terror, which was a ship that the United Kingdom, back when it still had, the East India Company and a giant empire, sent off to the, icy regions of our world to find a certain passage for trade. I'm trying not to give too much away because it's an amazing show. But Jared Harris is the main character in that show, and it is one of the most interesting horror TV series I've ever seen, because usually horror TV shows are trash. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's very few good horror television series, right? This one, because of the incredible cast, Jared Harris, a bunch of HBO regulars, a bunch of people who were in Rome in a lot of these really, really well-made shows, are playing these sailors that get trapped on this ship, that historically got trapped on this ship for 3 whole years. until their provisions began to rot, until they started to get mercury and I think lead poisoning, and just started going crazy. It's pure horror, like this show. It makes you feel absolutely terrible by the end. And there's a few other things I don't want to spoil about it, a few other elements, but it is such a good show, and so few people know about it. It's weird to me because it's Jared Harris and so many big actors. I don't know how it's not gotten more coverage than what it currently has.
Beautiful stuff. Joe, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was listening to you guys talk about Chernobyl, and what it reminded me of. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have seen documentaries like David Attenborough's documentaries, Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos, and even the original Cosmos by Carl Sagan. But what I wanted to recommend was Ken Brunner's The Cold War. Now, I used to use this for my history A-level when I was studying A-levels years ago. It's so good because it really it makes you feel the danger that existed in the Cold War. You know, that at any point nuclear war could have broken out and it would have been the end of humanity. That was it. Now, all the progress we made, all the historical, struggles that we've had, all gone in an instant if war suddenly broken out between two nuclear countries, that's what we had MAD for, mutually assured destruction. Hopefully, thankfully, it never came to that. So Ken Brunner does a great job of narrating that series. I think you could. It's pretty accessible. You can get it pretty much anywhere. I'm not going to tell you where, but use your imagination. So go watch that. But I also wanted to mention Deadwood. Deadwood's a pretty good show. Al Swearingen and his dealings with the Wild West and the Chinese at the time, who were, one particular character. I won't say who because it's so funny. Their relationship. It's just great. So go watch Deadwood. I mean,
I feel like Deadwood is one of the strongest westerns ever made in terms of just like a well-made western themed show. And I think that does easily bring us to something very modern and that a lot of us have been enjoying, and that is The Mandalorian, which I think we've all to ourselves individually described as a space western, haven't we?
I absolutely love The Mandalorian, and I can't talk enough about The Mandalorian. I genuinely think it is the pinnacle of Star Wars right now. I prefer it over the sequel trilogy. I prefer it over the prequel trilogy. For me, Mandalorian is amazing because it follows a very simple formula of less is more. Less is always more. And so when the big moments happen, like at the end of season 2, I'm not going to spoil what happens at the end of season 2, but that moment pays off incredibly well because it has been building up. You never see it coming, but you expect something big to happen, so something big eventually does happen. The Mandalorian is a tightly knit story of incredible little anecdotes which form together, aptly titled chapters. So again, it's pretty much like a book, if I may say so, and it is just absolutely wonderful in terms of its characterization, in terms of its world, in terms of its overall vibe, man. And that absolute wonderful soundtrack is just absolutely amazing. And similarly to the way Chernobyl plays with the soundtrack and it creates all these amazing moments, same with The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian soundtrack is absolutely insane. Go check it out. If you haven't seen The Mandalorian, what are you doing with yourself? But
yeah, no, I think I agree fully with like the sequel trilogy made me completely give up on Star Wars and modern Star Wars. I could not give less of a shit after, especially that third one, which was just, oh my god, that third film may be the worst thing I've seen in like the past 2 years, honestly. And this show came out, and I watched it just to see, can someone do something with Star Wars that isn't the Skywalkers, that isn't this main thread? Can someone finally explore the wider universe?
Empire versus Rebels,
Exactly. Just show me more of the universe, of the galaxy far, far away. I want to see the rest of said galaxy, and this show is that. This show explores stuff that usually, the mainstream Star Wars media would never bother touching on. The Mandalorians, their culture, shit like that. It is fascinating because it takes us to places in a point in time, and just it does stuff that Star Wars hasn't really had the courage to do in its mainstream media. But I think that if Disney wants Star Wars to go absolutely anywhere anymore, that's what they're going to have to do.
And they are.
Focus on side stuff like this, stuff disconnected from that main conflict, even if maybe it intersects at points. Yeah. because this is such a good way to handle a universe of that size.
It's absolutely
It's also a great way to build up if they ever do another movie series. They can have the shows as they're planning to do now, and I just can't wait to see them all because you guys know my bias. I love Jon Favreau. Yeah. What he's done for the MCU, he's kickstarted it, and what he's done for the Star Wars franchise, he's saved it along with Dave Filoni.
I've said this before. I will never forgive him for live action Lion King. But
it's
I give him credit for
it's
the good
okay.
things.
We forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to say that my favorite. I mean, I love all of the Mandalorian episodes, and including obviously the finale of the second season. I don't want to say anything about it, obviously, but my favorite episode of all time so far happens to be episode 5 of season 1, The Prisoner. That's just so well written and so well done, in my opinion.
Beautiful episode.
Lawrence has read Tough Voyaging. He can back me up on this. It's reminiscent of one of those stories in Tough Voyaging where Tough is on a crusade to win the ship. The Mandalorian is on a crusade to get his adopted son back, basically. Yeah. He wants to get Grogu back. Oh,
that's fine.
Baby Yoda
That's
back.
Fine.
He wants to,
he wants to get his highly merchandisable toy back.
Yes, exactly. And he's willing to do almost anything, obviously, other than, killing the characters that he's hunting down to get him back. And it's just such a good episode. Go watch The Mandalorian, and especially go watch episode 5, The Prisoner.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I have a hot take as always, because I can't just leave. I can't leave this podcast without dropping a hot take. The Crown is the best thing on Netflix right now. Fight me. I'm willing to fight anyone on it. I'm kidding. It's not the best thing on Netflix by far, but it's a phenomenal show, and it combines themes we covered on this podcast. It's a great historical piece, and it's pretty much what the Tudors is back then to what the current monarchy is right now. Yeah, it's quite dramatized, and it does lean extremely heavily on, the big moments of the monarchy. Plus, it got the government to appeal to Netflix to put "this is fiction" at the front of it in order to preserve any royal integrity, because the show in recent seasons does take a bit of a, how should I say, critical approach of Prince Charles mainly, but
I wonder why.
It's a good show. It's fun to watch with the family. I made it a ritual with my family to watch an episode per night, so that's 40
I've
evenings.
I've seen I think a season of it, and I do like it. And
it's pretty good. Plus, it combines. It also has Jared Harris for 2 episodes. So
yes, I'm willing.
The bandwagon is still rolling. Yes, but then he dies. Spoilers.
Yeah, it will never stop.
Anyways, but yeah.
I haven't watched The Crown just yet. I will do it at some point. But for those people who haven't watched The Crown or don't want to, for the reasons that Ivaylo just mentioned, go watch The Queen's Gambit. It's a completely different type of royalty. Yeah. If you want to, play on the pun. But it's been praised not just by me right now, but a lot of people love The Queen's Gambit. It's so well done for what it's trying to achieve. Like, the subject matter alone. Like, who would have thought they would have made a show about just chess, and it would have done so well, and it would have been made so well. And
plus, it's got Anya Taylor-Joy, who I really love from The Witch. She's a great actress.
Yeah, and I recently realized. Well, Lawrence told me that she loves watching Lord of the Rings, so. That's it. She's one of my favorite actors now. It doesn't matter. I've not seen anything she's ever been in before. But
have we got a podcast episode without mentioning Lord of the Rings yet, Joe?
It's my mission in life to never stop mentioning Lord of the Rings. I'm kidding.
Okay, since you've both given your final recommends, I want to give one more, especially if anyone who has Netflix. Peaky Blinders is one of the greatest shows on Netflix.
God damn.
It follows a main character that is the most well-written, morally grey, questionable anti-hero. Okay, so not an anti-hero, because that's actually too edgy for what he is. You see a man who is literally trying to keep the world around him from falling apart while dealing with his PTSD from the Great War and while dealing with a lot of other things
right before the
at the same time.
So
yes, and it is just a great show. It is well acted. There's not a single weak actor in it. It's gone on for a while, so it's got a good amount of content if you feel like binging. It's such a good character study. If you haven't seen Peaky Blinders.
How do you feel Tommy matches up against Heisenberg in terms of characters?
I think he's as close as I've seen in a morally grey main character.
That's a big hot take, guys. Big hot take.
Yes, I think he's as close as I've seen since Walt to such a well-written person who you root for the entire time. but there are moments where he will do things where you're like, man, what a horrible thing to do.
Hottest of takes.
And yet it makes total sense that he does it.
Absolutely. And, guys, we all love TV, and in this current period, it's proven to be an incredibly great source of escapism. It's kept a lot of us sane. And yeah, again, if anyone else wants us to cover more in-depth analysis of any of these shows that we've talked about, feel free to let us know in the comments. Feel free to let us know on social media. We love doing this stuff. We're passionate about it. So yeah, if anyone has nothing to add, I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, obviously there might come a time where we'll do another episode like this in the future, but once again, I want to remind everyone, please like, share and subscribe our stuff.
Yes.
And if you're on a different platform, please like and follow us. Share our stuff also to your friends and family.
Plugging.
Absolutely. Go follow us on Twitter at Faffing Friends. There's no with, it's just at Faffing Friends. And all of our stuff will be there. And hopefully we see you again next time.
This has been Ivaylo.
Mm-hmm. I'm Lawrence.
And I'm Joe.
And goodbye.
Have a great night.
Pleasure having you.
Bye-bye.